Welcome to the keynote, final keynote of the event. We've heard from international speakers. Now we're going to do something hyper local. We're in their territory. This is Ithaca is going to go. Is it carbon free in 2030?
That's what it wants to do.
That's what it will. All right, we're going to hear your story.
It's aspirational, I think, at this point.
Dr. Peter Bardaglio, a distinguished lecturer and sustainability advocate. He's the founding member of the New Roots Board of Trustees, and he's executive director of Ithaca 2030. So let's give him our full attention for next hour, Doctor.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Really inspiring to see so many young folks who are committed to putting engineering to work in the cause of sustainability. It's really terrific. So today, I'm going to talk about two projects that I was the founder of that here in Ithaca, so it is definitely local. One is the Tompkins County Climate Protection Initiative, and the other is the Ithaca 2030 District. And the Ithaca 2030 District, as I'll mention, is really under the umbrella of TICD. So, I started out as an historian, and I taught history for 20 years. My research specialty was the 19th century U.S. South, and I wrote a lot about the interplay between race and gender, something that's turned out to be all too relevant to our situation today. And then, I don't know, sometimes this happens to folks. I got involved in academic administration, and I ended up being a dean and then a provost at Ithaca College. And while I was the provost, I really got interested in sustainability and really pushed the college to move in that direction. And we launched a nationally recognized sustainability initiative that actually was, we were competing with Cornell at the time, and we were beating them then. Not so much now, but it was just really something I believed in, and for me the connection with my previous work was, as an historian, you're trained to look backwards, decades and decades. So it's the long view backwards, and sustainability really is about the long view forward. And so I just think of the work that I do as a great big windshield wiper that goes back and forth like that. And so in 2006, I decided to really devote myself full time to it. And I became a senior fellow at Second Nature, which is a think tank in Boston. I was a remote senior fellow. I go there sometimes, but Second Nature is the nonprofit that launched the American College and University President's Commitment. And that really was the first time something like 450 universities committed to climate neutrality. And it really was the first sector in the American economy to do that in a collective way. So that was really great to be part of. And while I was there, I co-authored a book on the higher ed sustainability movement called Boldly Sustainable. And then I'd been writing stuff that had lots of footnotes for a long time, and I decided I just really wanted to focus on something more concrete and more local. So that's the story of how I got here. And so it's really all about connecting and collaborating is the key strategy for moving forward. I don't think I have to tell you that we're in a climate emergency. Concentration of atmospheric CO2 hit 424 parts per million this past year. That's the highest level in human history, and highest probably in millions of years. And right now, unfortunately, there's only a 50-50 chance that we can keep global warming from rising more than 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is the point at which scientists feel we're really throwing the dice. And it just doesn't look like we're going to be able to do that. So now the real goal is, can we stay at two degrees centigrade or below? Because at that point, you really are looking at runaway climate change. The UN Secretary General, who's been quite vocal and really outspoken about climate change, and he's leading COP28 in the next week or so, I think it is. But back in 2022 at COP27, he was very blunt. He said, "We're on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator." Probably not an EV either. So what's the way forward? Where do we go from here if we've got our foot on the accelerator? Uh, like Thelma and Louise. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie, but you drive the car off the cliff at the end. We don't want to do that. So what we need to do is to work together as co-creators, not as competitors and not as consumers. The problem, of course, is our culture really makes it difficult to move in that direction because we're, we're really pushed to be competitive and to see ourselves mainly as consumers. And so we have to move beyond that. We have to become co-creators, connecting and collaborating, not command and control. We have to move from a vertical access, which is what command and control is all about, right? And we have to go to a horizontal access, and we have to learn how to create this social web instead of the hierarchical ladder. And that means moving from silos to gardens. It means cross-pollination. And so that's where we need to go. And of course, it's not going forward when I push the arrow key. Yeah, thanks. I bring the gremlins with me, by the way. These are not his. So why collaborate? Well, it has a really profound impact. It clearly leads, and studies show this, to more innovative problem solving. It also leads to more effective leveraging of, what are really finite resources. And it leads to enhanced resiliency, which we have to figure out how to do, because climate change is already here, right? And we're already feeling the effects of it. So we have to become more resilient. And then last but not least, I think most important actually is it strengthens community. We're only going to get through this if we do it in community. And so much about American society is about atomizing us and driving us in these individualistic directions. And we really have to resist that going forward. So one of the ways I wanted to model this for the local community was to form something called TICB. It's the Tompkins County Climate Protection Initiative. And what it is a multi-sector coalition of local community leaders and activists who are committed. And we did this in 2008. And we've been meeting monthly since 2008. So we're not new to this. And we have a really strong collective group of leaders and activists who've been working together on this. But we're committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, also accelerating the transition to a clean energy economy, and strengthening community resilience. We're very lucky in that we've been funded by a local foundation, which also is national in scope. It's probably the most progressive foundation in the United States. But Park Foundation has been funding my work, and the launch of TICB in 2008. So I owe a lot to them. So here's how it works. All right, right at the center is this notion of collaborative support. That's the Park Foundation's local sustainability program. And I should say they spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars each year supporting local sustainability efforts. So it's really, really special and very distinctive. So that's at the heart of this. And then one of the other sectors is the higher education sector, of course, and that includes Cornell, Ithaca College, and almost more important than these two, the Tompkins County Cooperative Extension. They've been really, really active in TICB and have really developed some great projects along the way that we've been able to support. And then there's the local government sector that includes folks from Tompkins County Legislature, the Planning Department, which is actually the full name of it is Planning and Sustainability Department, and also the City of Ithaca itself, and the towns of Caroline, Dryden, and the town of Ithaca, not the City of Ithaca. There's actually a town of Ithaca for some reason. And what's even more confusing is that the town hall for the town of Ithaca is right in downtown in the city of Ithaca. So go figure. But they're great. And then we have the nonprofit sector. And these are just some of the nonprofits that have been active in TICB. Sustainable Finger Lakes, PRI, which I don't know if I could even say this, the Paleontological Research Institution. I can't think of three more boring words to put together, but they study fossils. But they also have something called the Museum of the Earth there. And it's really, really a cool place to learn about, this doesn't sound so cool, to learn about the various extinction eras that we've gone through. And so, looking at that is pretty sobering, but it reminds you, of course, that we're in the sixth mass species extinction right now. And then there's the Finger Lakes Land Trust and Local First Ithaca and the Science Center, which is a terrific resource for children. It focuses on teaching and showing young kids what science is all about. And then finally, there's the business finance sector that includes Alternatives Federal Credit Union, Holt Architects, which is the green architecture firm in town, Tatum Engineers, which is actually the green engineering firm in town, and something called MPEC that provides financing for local retrofit projects. So in terms of TICB, we do a lot of communications and outreach. The reps from each of the sectors that I just outlined form the steering committee, and they establish the agenda each month for the general meetings, as well as our overall strategy as a coalition. We have a website, a Facebook page, and we put out an e-newsletter 6 times a year, every other month. And then probably the most important thing we do, or the highest profile thing we do, is we put together an annual report, what each of the members of the coalition are doing to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and accelerate the transition to clean energy. And last year we had almost 40 submissions, and it was over 40 pages long. But it details, I think, in an important way, what the community is doing together. It's the only place in the community where you can see as a whole, like the mirror. Here's what we got done the past year. And I think that's a really important way to do this, because you have to stop and say, hey, we've done a lot. So let's just do a lot more the next year. And we've spun off a bunch of different projects. The Tompkins Energy Conservation Corps, which was primarily young people, Cornell students who got involved in going door to door in one of the local towns, Dryden, and handing out, this shows you how long ago it was, CFL bulbs. and material on how to retrofit your house. We also did the Get Your Green Back Tompkins. That was a countywide energy campaign to raise public awareness. That first started as part of TICB and then spun off to be an independent thing. And then that just ended. I was involved with Get Your Green Back the whole time on the steering committee, but that spun off to become one of the clean energy hubs of NYSERDA across the state. So that's getting funded at like $2 million to really move forward in a very professional, organized way. So it's great to see how it got started in the discussion at TICB and how it's become this really big deal for the southern tier, not just for Tompkins County. And the other thing is, in recent years especially, we've been very active in terms of advocacy around climate and energy policy in New York. We're a member of the statewide coalition, New York Renews and Renewable Heat Now. One of our big victories last year was the passage of the All Electric Buildings Act. That happened in May. We were the first state to say, okay, after this particular date, you can't use fossil fuels in new construction. It was set up in two tiers. Buildings under 8 stories could not use fossil fuel after 2026. And then in 2029, buildings over 8 stories had to move in this direction. And then the big project, our flagship program that didn't spin off, it's still under the umbrella of TICB, is the Ithaca 2030 district. We're part of a North American network of 24 different cities in the US and Canada. And here you can see the different cities. And hopefully I see one of the things I hope you see right away is they're all big cities for the most part. We're by far the smallest network, but they let us in. It wasn't like Godzilla meets Bambi. It was more like Godzilla babysitting for Bambi. But it's really interesting to see what these major cities are doing in terms of trying to increase the uh, um, energy and water performance of commercial buildings in downtown areas. So that's really what our goal is here locally. We're really focused on commercial and mixed use buildings, and we also try to reduce transportation emissions as a district. We're in contrast to the Ithaca Green New Deal, which I'll talk about later. That's government led. This effort is private sector led. It involves voluntary collaboration. It's based in market realities. We want it to really be real, not just something theoretical, not something that's just a dream. And so what we're trying to do together is build the business case for sustainability, which is really what my book was all about. That really focused on building the business case for higher ed sustainability. And we collect, benchmark, and analyze data to track progress. So what are the 2030 targets? For new construction, it's to become carbon neutral by 2030, and for water and transportation to reduce the emissions there by 50%. For already existing buildings, which we really focus on in Ithaca, and I'll explain why in a second, it's 50% for all three by 2030. So why focus on buildings? And for those of you at Cornell, this view should be somewhat familiar. Well, the built environment is responsible for about 42% of CO2 emissions on this planet each year. And of the total emissions, building operations are responsible for about 27% annually. That's a big chunk of greenhouse gas emissions. And then when you look just at the embodied carbon of 4 building and infrastructure materials, cement, iron, steel, aluminum, you're talking about another 15%. So it's the 15 plus the 27 adds up to 42% of CO2 emissions each year around the globe. So we got launched in 2016. Part of the strategy here was to find a more effective way than the coalition to engage the business community in an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's allowed us to build a really solid bridge to the business community locally. And the other thing we really thought was important was to build a culture of benchmarking. Nobody was collecting data on how buildings downtown were performing in terms of energy and water. We were all just guessing. And so the members of this include building owners, community organizations, government agencies, and professionals. This is the advisory board. If you're not from here, you won't recognize any names. Even if you're from here, you won't recognize any of these names. But I just want to put it up there so you see the diversity of the advisory board, people from all different parts of the community. We were very fortunate in that we got a NYSERDA planning grant in 2015, and along with the Park Foundation grant that we get each year, we were able to begin building the district. We at first said, well, we got to figure out what the market is. So we did a market analysis and we issued that report. We put together a strategic plan and then a public outreach strategy. The other important piece was, how are you going to pay for this? So we developed a financing guide, an energy services guide, and a small commercial toolkit for owners to begin to see what they could do to reduce their carbon footprint. And then we conducted recruitment workshops about the benefits of the 2030 district and training sessions on Portfolio Manager, which is a platform that the Environmental Protection Agency offers for free that allows us to upload the energy and water data and keep track of that. And then we created what the baselines for the district. And you can't do benchmarking unless you have baselines. So that was a really tricky piece. And then we went ahead and launched our website in 2016. So what are we doing now? Our ongoing activities involve collecting monthly energy and quarterly water data for property owners. And as I said, we upload that to a Portfolio Manager. But then we went ahead, because Portfolio Manager is a bit unwieldy if you're not familiar with all of the ins and outs of it. So we thought, well, let's build an online building performance dashboard that each owner can get a link to online and interact with and use that in a much more visual, straightforward way than Portfolio Manager. And it was Cornell undergraduate engineering students who built this dashboard. So I really, this 2030 district owes a lot to those students. It's not something I could even imagine doing. It involves both Python and Excel coding and integrating those two. We also carry out transportation surveys to track carbon emissions from commuters, and we hold quarterly meetings of district partners, and we publish a quarterly e-newsletter. And then, like with TICB's annual report, we issue an annual district progress report, and I'll share some of those findings from our last report with you. This is how the process for going out and onboarding new property members. I go out and beat the bushes. It involves a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of meetings on Zoom to try to persuade them to come on board. But the pitch that we make is the one you learn in business school, right? Is you can't manage what you can't measure. And then we talk about the opportunities for networking and community, and then also to engage them in thinking about ways that they can help prevent runaway climate change. This is what Portfolio Manager looks like. And this is just one page of it. There are pages and pages. And it just is hard to wrap your head around if you're new to this sort of thing. So this is the building performance dashboard that we and that when I say we, I mean the Cornell students under my guidance. I just told them what I wanted it to look like, but they did the real thing. And as you can see, there are drop-down menus on the left where you can isolate particular year performance, and even a month, and then different targets that can get set that change the numbers over here in the center. And it really does give building owners a very straightforward way of seeing what kind of progress they're making. And this isn't being done a whole lot in the United States. I mean, it seems like an obvious thing we should be doing. I mean, especially for you engineers, you must just go, duh, of course you would do this. But you know, it is a big effort, and it involves a lot of work. And I'm really lucky to have, you know, these great engineering undergraduate interns. And this year's intern is Joey Armstrong. So he's been vital to our effort, and he's helped snag some of the gremlins that I always carry around with me and straighten out some of the code for this. Here's how we calculate the different building baselines. And I won't go through this, but you can see it involves a lot of different databases that we pull together to calculate just the baselines for the buildings for energy and water and transportation. This is a map of the district, and it what was really cool, at least, you know, I get excited about stupid stuff that nobody else does, but I got very excited that the intern last year, Michael Licata, figured out how to create an inset for the map to focus on downtown, because we really do a lot of work around the commons here, and the overall map of the district doesn't really make clear how many buildings are around the commons, and so that's what the inset does. Where are we right now? Well, we have, in terms of square feet committed, about 604,000 square feet. We have 46 buildings, and we have 31 property members. And we just keep recruiting people. I mean, I've got 2 other property members that I've got my eyes on, and that I'm bugging right now to bring them on board. This is what the district looks like in terms of different kinds of buildings. As you can see here, predominantly office buildings, no big surprise there, but, you know, pretty good representation of some of the other sectors. And again, this isn't going to make any difference to you if you don't live here, but these are iconic businesses in Ithaca. And so I just wanted, if you just look down, you can see the different kinds of organizations and businesses that are part of this. I love the fact that we have Ithaca Piercing and Tattoo now as part of the district. That's pretty cool. And our latest building is the Mia Restaurant building, which is a terrific place to eat if you ever want to find some place on the commons to go to. And then this is the last page, but Purity Ice Cream is really iconic here. The Southside Community Center, State Theater, really important to have these folks on board because they have such a high profile in the community, and it really helps strengthen our credibility. So what about the data in terms of what we've accomplished? This is from the 2022 progress report. This thing takes hours to put together. And Joey's going to find out very soon how much work it takes, because he collects and crunches all the numbers for the whole year. I just do the graphics and the blah, 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 you know, the narrative stuff. But it was really nice because last year, the district reduced its energy consumption by 27% from the district baseline. And we used 40% less water than the baseline last year. There was a slight improvement in commuter emissions. I'll talk about this in more detail, but we didn't achieve a 16% reduction from 2021 baseline results, I mean. And we were significantly below the 2019 emissions level. Still not getting to the 2020 target, but at least heading in that direction. And then the other thing, just to underscore the kind of growth that we've experienced, there's been a 45% increase in committed square footage since the end of 2021. So what does energy look like? Well, what we do here, you see that gray bar on the far left, that's the district baseline, and we calculate that as a weighted mean of the individual buildings' energy baselines. And as you can see here, for 2022, it was 104. The 2020 target would be 25% less than that. That's the first green target going from left to right. The target there for energy use intensity was 83. And energy use intensity, I'm pretty sure most of you know what that is, but that's just the British KBTUs, British thermal units, divided by the square foot of the building. And we use KBTUs because obviously electricity is measured in kilowatt hours. And if you're an all electric building, that's great. You know, that's very simple. But we have a lot of buildings that are still using natural gas, and natural gas is measured in cubic feet. So by converting to KBTUs, we're able to create pie charts that show them what percentage of their energy is gas and what percentage is electricity. And so at the district level, and that's really what we worry about. How are we doing as a district when you put all the buildings together? Last year, we were 76, which is clearly below the 2020 target of 83. And what's very exciting, I think, is that it puts us halfway toward the 2025 target of 30% reduction. And remember, this is at the end of 2022, so we still had 3 more years to get to the 2025 target. So that was very encouraging. So in terms of the individual buildings and how they did last year, this represents the spread of how the buildings performed versus the baseline. And obviously, none of these buildings are identified, but we share this in the annual report so you get an idea of the spectrum. And obviously, over on the right in the orange are the bad boys. They're the ones that aren't even meeting the baseline. And of course, we're going to have buildings like that, and we want them to be part of the district because hopefully they'll learn as we go forward ways that they can improve their carbon footprint and reduce it. But again, we really are concerned how we do as a district. When you look at the green bars, you'll see that really there were quite a few property members, actually almost 24, who met the 2020 target of 20% reduction. And of those 13 properties, we had, of those 2023, we had 13 property owners who met the 2030 target of 50%. So they're already there. And in terms of what difference we're making, here's the amount of energy costs that was avoided, the CO2 emissions that were avoided, and the CO2 emissions are equivalent of 15,000 young trees getting planted. So that's pretty cool. In terms of water, we did even better than we did with energy last year. The baseline water use intensity, which again is just gallons divided by the square feet of the building, and then we aggregated all of that as a weighted mean of the individual buildings. The baseline here was 22 gallons per square feet, and at the district level, so the 2020 target is 17. The 2025 target is 14. We had actual performance of 13 last year, so we surpassed the 2025 target. So again, we were pretty excited about that. Yeah, and here you see even more buildings met the 2020 target in terms of water performance, and actually 22 of of the buildings that we collected data on last year met the 2030 target. And here's the difference that made: the water cost avoided, uh, the gallons saved, and that was the equivalent of 423,000 showers. Maybe not the kind of shower I take because my back is really, when I wake up in the morning, it's just awful. But the average mean shower, and so that's 423,000 showers avoided by the water measures that building owners were making. Now, I said before I'd drill in a little bit on transportation, and transportation is really the toughest nut of all. I think any urban planner would tell you that in terms of trying to lower communities' greenhouse emissions. In part, it's because we're so wedded to the automobile. And everybody thinks, well, okay, all we have to do is turn to EVs. But that's not the whole solution. We have to have multimodal transportation, and we have to have ways for people to get around in the city uh, in a variety of different ways. Buses, shuttles. Uh, um, we have Ithaca Car Share, where you can become a member of, and you don't have to buy a car. You just use those cars that are all around the city. Um, the baseline for the district in 2022 was 1,500 CO2 equivalent divided by the commuter, divided by the year. Our actual was 1421. So we did beat the baseline, um, but we're still well above the 2020 target. As you can see, there was a really significant reduction from, I mean, 2021 was embarrassing. I mean, that was just what happened was 2020, right, is the pandemic. And then the pandemic sort of ends, quote unquote, and everybody gets in their car and starts driving. And that really shot up. And then it settled back down to 1421. Um, the remarkable thing is that before COVID, only 10% of our survey respondents worked at home. And with the 2020 spring lockdown, that proportion of remote workers jumped to 45%. So we went from 10% remote workers to 45% remote workers almost overnight. And even with the reopening that took place toward the end of the year, there were still 32% of the respondents who continued to work remotely. And similarly, we saw a reduction of remote workers in 2021 to 28%, and the percentage of commuters who drove alone jumped from 39% during the lockdown to 51%. This is not the way to prevent runaway climate change. And these trends did continue in 2022, with the percentage of remote workers dropping to 15%. But I think a lot more people were interested in taking the bus than they were before. Nobody wanted to take a bus, even in 2021. They were afraid of getting COVID. And so by 2022, that anxiety eased. All right, so how does all this fit into the Ithaca Green New Deal, which has gotten all kinds of national and international attention? Frankly, I think more than it probably should have. I think we got out ahead of our skis, and we got a lot more publicity for what we were going to achieve as opposed to what we were actually achieving. But, it still brought the community together around some important goals. So the city, and here I mean Common Council, right, and the mayor voted unanimously to commit the city to carbon neutrality by 2030. And we're not just talking about the government buildings getting to carbon neutrality. We're talking about all the buildings in the community. In the latest greenhouse gas inventory that the Office of Sustainability in City Hall carried out showed that buildings make up an estimated 58% of emissions in Ithaca. And of that, the commercial sector contributes 38%. So it's pretty clear when you look at these numbers that energy efficiency and electrification in the built environment are really, really crucial if we're going to achieve carbon neutrality. And we believe as a district that our focus on improving the performance of commercial buildings can really help contribute to the community's carbon footprint reduction. And this is a very nice quote from the Director of Sustainability about the role that the 2030 district plays in the Ithaca Green New Deal. The bottom line is, we're providing them with really valuable data that nobody else is really collecting. And so this gives them a window into how commercial buildings in Ithaca are doing. And remember, commercial buildings make up 38% of the greenhouse gas inventory. Here are just some pictures of some of the buildings that we have that are part of this. So you may have a question in your mind, and it's an important question. Why aren't we focused on new construction? Why are we so obsessed with the building performance of already existing buildings? Well, that's because of policy changes that took place in Ithaca and then at the state level. Ithaca, even before the state, said all new construction from 2026 on has to be fossil free. And leading up to that, they're put under incrementally stricter targets each year. So the work is already being done there by policy. And it's really remarkable to see how many developers came in, because you see new construction all around us. But all of that had to get a building permit, or it couldn't be built or occupied. And to get that building permit, you had to demonstrate that you were meeting first the 40% reduction target. And then, of course, in 2026, to meet the goal of not using fossil fuel in the building at all. Very ambitious, but that's the real part of the Ithaca Green New Deal, because there's leverage there. You want to build your building, you want to occupy it afterwards, you want to bring tenants in, you have to meet these measurements. So I want to leave you with just a final thought. And this comes from somebody who's both a theologian and an ecologist. And Thomas Berry says that we have to understand that the universe is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. So each of us is in this web, right? That's what communion is, interconnected, and as subjects. We're not just a random atomized collection of objects. And if you're thinking like that, then you realize something I always used to tell my students in my history classes. The most important thing you can learn in history, and I think the most important thing you can learn from this kind of work, is how to become a subject in history, not an object of history. Too many of us are just getting pushed along by impersonal historical forces that we don't feel we have any control over. But it's so important to see yourself as a change agent and be that subject in making a history. And that's what you all are set up to do when you go into your professional careers. You will all be acting as subjects in history, not just as objects, not just as a collection of objects, but as a community of subjects working together professionally to help us move into a future that's as carbon free as possible. Thank you. We have time for a few questions. I mean, I hit 50 minutes, so you can see I taught for 20 years, and I don't even think about it. I just get to 50 minutes. It's so weird. It's just, I don't know, becomes part of your DNA at some point. I can't talk longer than 50 minutes, but I can't talk less than 50 minutes. And that's not actually a good thing at home. Yeah, you have a question.
I'm also very curious to know whether there's an infrastructure, whether it's for data gathering on sensors or just what kind of infrastructure do other districts that have similar ambitions but haven't really started to do this work?
Uh, are you saying other cities?
Yeah, some, some of them are from different parts of
Yeah, yeah.
but they would have to think about implementing. For example, for IoT data gathering, or is it simply information that is already available?
Well, IoT data gathering would be a dream, right? Uh, and the thing about the work that we're doing is it's kind of time intensive because you know, we have access to the energy bills through the local utility portal. We get written permission from the building owners to do that. And so we take that data each month and we upload that into Portfolio Manager. And when I say upload, we upload it, the intern inputs it by hand. So, we can do that because of the scale of what we're working with. It's getting a little unwieldy, but, we can still do that. But learning how to automate uh, the the collection and analysis of this data is something that really needs to happen.
I'm just going to check to make sure that no one
Yeah,
asked
sure.
any questions in the chat.
Oh, right. They're there too.
No, we are okay.
Okay. Yes.
I want to ask if your targets as a district are guided primarily only by the buildings that are associated with signing up with the program, reporting their data, or whether there's a more holistic way that you guys are looking at the entire district of Ithaca to gauge everything, or whether it's only the buildings.
Right now, we're only collecting the buildings because we have to get the building owner's permission to collect that data. But what we try to do is get as wide a selection of different kinds of buildings in the city that we think is representative and could be extrapolated to. But the goals of the Ithaca 2030 district are set by the network. The 2030 districts network was originally part of Architecture 2030. And they got the first few districts going, and then this spun off and became an independent nonprofit, 501c3. We were the 13th district, and the first one in New York. New York City, of course, became a district, and they're bigger than us. But the thing they can't ever take away from us is we were first. Yes.
Speaking of that, can you just go over the process of becoming a 2030 district, sort of on the political level, both for Ithaca, but also with other cities?
Yeah. Well, obviously involves consensus building, and it's helpful to have this, the city government behind it, which of course we have because of the Ithaca Green New Deal. It's probably easier to get that support in Ithaca because of that than elsewhere. But the real work is in putting together a group of forward-thinking, forward-leaning building owners who see why this is important, and they see the business case for it, that they can use this data to figure out how to use less energy and use less water. Those are becoming increasingly expensive commodities. And so property owners, and especially developers who own quite a chunk of of buildings in a large portfolio, I'm talking millions of square feet, they get really serious about this. And so you have to go out into the community and connect with those folks if you're a larger city.